And I'll just
Okay.
Sherry, thank you so much for coming to chat with us just a little bit today. I want to try to give people an understanding, a little bit of a glimpse into why this tapping class that we're having is going to be so powerful, why it can be so helpful. So the first thing I want to ask is, can you just help people understand a little bit about the gifts and tools that you have that are beyond that psychologist degree, right? The tools that
Sure.
you have. Tell us a little bit about the tools you have beyond your consonants at the end of your name.
Well, when I was in um, clinical training, social work clinical training, I realized because I was doing my own work that I needed additional training to really help people release trauma from their bodies. And cognitive behavioral therapy is very um, good to a certain degree because we need to talk about what's going on. And I look for what I call energetically sensitive words and a repetition of a statement that somebody makes. And that's a sign for me to go deeper. And it's hard to do that with talk therapy. So when I started various trainings, technically the reason why I started it was because I started taking home others' um, issues, others' energy. And I didn't know what an empath was. I had no idea. I knew what being intuitive was to a certain degree, but I had no idea that I could take on others' energies. And when I started doing the work on myself, I recognized that, again, talk therapy was limited to a certain degree. We carry our emotions physically, and a what's called somatic release or releasing it from the physical body is it's one of the tools that I find the most helpful way of releasing, not just repressing emotion. And if we repress it, it will come back. And there's a saying that I know you're familiar with. It's all the times and ways that we have felt a specific feeling will come up to be released. If we don't have those tools to release them, they come up, they become disruptive and create more trauma. So I started with something called Psyche, and it looks at um, subconscious beliefs. And people are always given affirmations, but they can't really internalize the affirmation because there's an incongruence. So a typical, what we call a global psychological reversal. Basically, it's an incongruence. I say I want to be happy, but part of me I has identified with being miserable. So there's an incongruence there. So these techniques will help with that. I've had training in Psyche, emotion code, emotional freedom tech, therapy, thought filled therapies. I am sure I'm leaving it out.
Body
I
talk.
I yes, and I one of the things that I found was um, for me, I chose to integrate each one, not use it in the pure format that obviously has to be trained because if you have tools in your tool belt and all of a sudden you realize that you need a hammer instead of a screwdriver, I needed that technology and training to assist with that. So that's how I developed all the went to all the different trainings and the techniques that I've used for people. Now I want to say something about grief and loss because I did a lot of bereavement counseling, and I was certified in bereavement uh, counseling, and I continued to recognize with some of the other trainings that I had that the stages of grief were sending the message that somehow We go through these stages and we're over it. And we never get over grief. We get over the suffering of grieving. We learn how to rise above the negative experiences of the grief. And the other thing is there's many layers of grief. And that was not taught in your typical bereavement counseling certification. And when I say many layers, it may be obvious. Obviously, I'll say the more challenging type of grief, most people would say, is the death of a loved one, transition of a loved one. But within that loss, there's a loss of identity. Am I still a mother if I've lost my only child? Am I still a wife, husband, partner if I've lost a spouse or partner? The role identity is there, and the regular routines and habits that you developed with the loved one. And there's variations. I won't go into everything here. But the other thing of grief is it's not recognized. We can grieve something we've never had. So people will talk about, this is not the way I thought my retirement was going to go. I've had people do this in the cancer support group that I run, and they were diagnosed with cancer, and in their minds, they wanted to travel when they retired. Instead, they're doing cancer treatment of some sort. And not only that, they've lost abilities and mobilities, and their body looks different, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of grief there. And then when the holidays come up, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Holidays come up, and we've always been, well, at least in my age, I have been. We see all these. It's a Wonderful Life show
The
around the
Hallmark
holidays.
Hallmark holidays, Hollywood holidays. And you know what? I
Yes.
think that is the biggest reason people get so much into so much,
Yes.
because I
Yes.
just feel like, okay, but my holiday doesn't look like that. And I'm looking at all
Yes.
these warm, fuzzy holidays on the TV. And I'm like, now I just want to cry because I'm like,
Yes.
my
Yes.
family doesn't, I don't, this
Yeah.
doesn't look
Why
like
can't
mine.
my family? Why don't I have? Where, what did I do? And there's a combination of things happen there. One, people grieve because they don't have that family dynamic that is shown, the Hollywood dynamics of well, now they're getting a little bit better about showing some of the other things that happen, but we still have this desire to get together with loved ones, and it may not be family because family may be dysfunctional in some way, or you may have lost a family member to death. They may have transitioned. There may be a relationship, etc. But the holidays add pressure to the grieving process because it has this. It has a way of bringing up all of the dysfunction in a way that you'll see other families, or you may hear your friends talk about what they're going to do, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't happen for a lot of families. So looking at that, looking and working with the grief, recognizing how you can recreate something that it is you want rather than look at everything that you don't have. You create something that you desire and can have. So there's a variety of things that I work with around the holidays, with the grieving process, rebuilding that, recreating it in a life that is more functional, so to speak, and also protecting, learning how to protect yourself from some of that dysfunction that families may suffer with during the holidays, learning how to protect yourself from that.
Right. Those are good tools. So
Yes.
so we're going to be in our class, we're going to be covering some of those things to help people really create the tapping script that works for what they're experiencing, to
Yes.
help them get through the holidays with a whole lot less, you know, suffering. That's
Yes.
the point. And,
Yes.
there is some evidence in some of the other owners that we have talked to. There's some really strong evidence that doing this work in the scalar field is helping
Absolutely.
people make bigger leaps forward, getting more of that weight, more of that
Yes.
pressure
Yes.
off more
Yes.
quickly, because they're in a field that's conducive to helping support that.
Absolutely.
And then we're using all the energies and the tapping on
Yes.
us. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's a really good combination.
It's a wonderful combination because when we work with energy, which by the way is everything. I mean, everything is energy. And people used to think energy was woo woo. And now that I'm part of an organization that has been at the forefront of researching these techniques, what they do to our energy field. I just have to say, a side note, it used to be called the aura, but now it's a biofield because science has proven that it exists. It's still an aura. It's it's around every living thing. And
Right.
so when we work with energy, when we work the field of energy in a sanctuary like you have developed, it's going to heighten and improve and speed up, if you will, the recovery process, because that interchange of an exchange of energy, you always want to, if you release something, and you know this, if you release something, you want to bring something back in to fill up that void, something that is healing, and that energy, an affirmation, color is a form of energy. There's a variety of different ways, but I think the system will assist with all of the release work and then refilling in what it is you want.
I told somebody recently, I said, just keep in mind, every emotion you have requires two things. It requires chemistry and electricity.
Yes.
So nothing that we're doing in our brain or that we're creating, nothing that we are thinking or being or feeling can be felt or made. You can't make those emotions happen if you don't have chemistry to make
Yes.
the electrical connections occur. And
Yes.
both of those things are in the EE system and in the scalar wave room. Both of those things are improved. You have more energy, and they've been able
Yes.
to prove that when
Yes.
you're re-energizing the cells back up to that 90 millivolts, that they're able to work better than they did when they were short of that electricity.
Yes.
And it helps with moving the chemistry. So I think that's part of why, if people understand, every emotion you feel, happy, sad, whatever, requires
Yeah.
chemistry and electricity to happen.
Yes.
So
And I always like to say it the emotion, people think that it's wrong to be angry or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of people that have variations of beliefs about emotion. It's not the emotion itself that is dysfunctional, it's how you react to it. So when
right.
you have tools to be able to react in a healthy way in an energy system like the EE system, excuse me, as well as having the other tools to release it from your body, you're going to be better able to, I like to call it reprogram. Almost everybody has a phone and a computer now, so they pretty much kind of use that analogy. But you can reprogram what it is you want, release what it is you are suffering from, what feels dysfunctional in some way, and reprogram
That,
what it is you
yeah.
want.
And I think some of those little tools that we were talking about that help move the energy right out, the grief right out, when you can use those in an instant to help relieve some of the
Yes.
suffering, then I feel like your grief or whatever it is you're dealing with can move through you a little easier.
Yes.
I think it can come to a resolution. I feel like grief that is like shaking, like earthquaking. I feel like quaking grief isn't actually helpful for us to move past it, as when we can get into the state of actually feeling the feelings and thinking the thoughts. It's like, but these are the things I'm going to miss. Right.
Yeah.
That isn't quaking grief. That's actually thought filled, processed, heart centered grief. Now you can start moving that energy along.
Yes.
But I think when you have quaking grief, quaking fear, quaking upset, where it's just shaking you to your core, I don't feel like you can be processing or moving along.
It's harder, and people will stop. The other thing I want to say here, no one, well, I shouldn't say that. Most of us don't like to cry, but there are chemicals released in those tears that literally have been shown at a pain reliever, an emotional and physical pain reliever happens when you cry. But most of us, I mean, and I understand this, and I literally, after my nephew died, I was in a shopping, I don't even remember, a store, someplace, and a song came on, and it was the song we played at his funeral. And all of a sudden, all of the emotions came up, and I didn't want to start bawling in the middle of the store. So I rushed to the restroom, allowed myself to cry, did the tapping techniques and the heart massage and some other things that we'll talk about. And I was able to titrate and release the emotion, but not repress the tears because I'm in a public place. And there are some variations of exercises we'll do, that the touch and breathe process that people can do if they're in public, that can help bring those tears. Again, you want to release them. And I'm not saying that you should stop the tears if you have a place to go, the restroom, wherever. But there are also things that you can do to help bring those tears out and dial it down, because you're not in a place, you're in a public place.
Right.
Yeah.
I think those are the most important tools for us to help us have a more less suffering and a more stable life. Right.
Yes.
I feel like if you can kind of pull yourself back together, process that. I just don't believe in stuffing it down. I don't believe in that idea that we just need to stop thinking about it and be happy. I just have not found that to be actually.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't. I don't think it does, because I think it just comes back later.
That's a repression or suppression. There's variations, and I'm not going to go into that. But regardless of you suppressing or repressing, it doesn't go anywhere, and it accumulates, and then all the times and ways.
Right, and that's why that book, The Body Talk, or The Body Keeps Score. That's how that book and some of the other work that they're realizing that you can pretend like it's not in there. You can just be happy and think all the good thoughts, but the body is still keeping score, and that stuff is still stuck in there, and it will become, they are finding, medically proven, it will become debilitating early onset diseases. So getting it out and learning how to tap through those things, I think, is the best way to last a little longer, be a little happier, and, a little healthier in the life that we have here. So that's why I'm so excited about having you come to the center and experiment and helping other people make a leap forward instead of the steps, which I always hated, like baby steps. I'm like, I hate baby steps. I'm not doing baby steps. I want a quantum leap forward out of this stuff.
Well, and the stages of grief implied that you went through steps and somehow you got over it. And first of all, most of us, if we've lost a loved one, or a loved one's transition, whatever term feels appropriate, we don't want to get over the grief at a loss. We want to move through it and be able to reframe it in a way. And the way that I use the phases of grief, and I'll go over that at the workshop. The phases imply you're going to go through those phases, and you may revisit. And that, as long as you're going through those various phases, that means you are in recovery, so to speak. Recovery is going through the phases.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for taking a minute so that we can just kind of help people understand the value and the reasons that it's so important to do the work. Thank you for all of that. Helping us understand, and I'm looking forward to the workshop.
Looking forward to it, Deanna.
Thank you. Okay,